You're sitting in a room full of people having a conversation. Everyone's nodding along, laughing at jokes you don't find funny, discussing topics that feel surface level and hollow. And you're smiling, participating, pretending. Because you learned a long time ago that showing people how your mind actually works makes them uncomfortable. So you become fluent in a language that isn't yours. You've mastered the art of dumbing yourself down, and nobody knows you're lonely in a room full of people. If you have an extremely high IQ, we're talking 130 and above, maybe 160 plus. This isn't occasional, it's constant. You've spent your entire life translating your thoughts into language others can process, watching conversations move at a pace that feels agonizingly slow, holding back observations that would make people think you're showing off when you're just thinking. And the worst part? You can't explain this to anyone without sounding arrogant, so you carry it silently. Because here's what nobody tells you about being extremely intelligent. It's isolating, not occasionally, permanently. You're living in a world where only 1 in 40 people thinks remotely like you do. And if your IQ pushes past 160, 80% of people like you report intense social isolation. Not because you're antisocial, because finding someone who processes reality at your speed is statistically almost impossible. It started early. You were the kid who asked why until adults got frustrated, who understood concepts years before your classmates, who read encyclopedias for fun while other kids played tag. And teachers either loved you or resented you. There was no in between. Maybe you were labeled gifted and placed in special programs, which sounds like validation until you realize it just made you more visible, more different, more isolated from the kids you wanted to relate to. Or maybe you flew under the radar entirely. Teachers missed it. You learned to hide it, because standing out meant being targeted. You figured out quickly that showing your full intelligence made other kids uncomfortable. They called you know-it-all, teacher's pet, weird. So you started performing, laughing at jokes you didn't find funny, pretending homework was hard when you finished it in minutes, monitoring every word you said to make sure it didn't reveal how differently your brain worked. Researchers call this social masking, and it's exhausting. By age 10, you were already fluent in translating your thoughts into language that wouldn't alienate your peers. You learned that being smart meant being alone, so you chose fitting in over being authentic. And that choice carved out a loneliness that still lives inside you. Let's talk about what actually happens in your head, because this is where the reference to intelligence as a gift falls apart. You talk to yourself constantly, not casually, intensely, running through problems, replaying conversations, analyzing outcomes. Studies from the University of Wisconsin found that people who verbalize their thoughts process information faster and retain it longer. You're literally coaching your own brain through complex reasoning all day. Einstein did it, but when you do it in public, people think you're strange. And overthinking? That's not anxiety. That's metacognition, thinking about your own thinking. Your brain doesn't just process information, it analyzes how it processes information. You replay conversations and spot 17 different interpretations. You question decisions from angles nobody else considered. Your mind operates on multiple layers simultaneously, which means rest is almost impossible. Then there's boredom, crippling, constant boredom. Your dopamine system craves novelty. Simple tasks don't reward your brain the way they reward others. So your mind searches for complexity, for challenge, for something that actually engages it. This is why you procrastinate on easy work. Not because you're lazy, because your brain refuses to activate for anything below a certain complexity threshold. Psychologists call it active procrastination. You perform best under pressure because that's when the task finally becomes interesting enough to engage your full capacity. Here's the cruel irony. The more intelligent you are, the more you doubt yourself. The Dunning-Kruger effect shows that people with less knowledge are more confident. They don't know what they don't know, but you're painfully aware of the gaps in your knowledge, of how much you still don't understand, of the complexity that exists beyond your current comprehension. So, while people with average intelligence move through life confident in their abilities, you're plagued by self-doubt. You question everything, your decisions, your abilities, your worth. Not because you're insecure, because your brain is sophisticated enough to recognize uncertainty, to spot the variables you haven't accounted for, to see where your reasoning might break down. And that awareness feels like doubt when it's actually intellectual humility. And then there's the physical experience. You're sitting in a room, everyone else seems fine, but you're overwhelmed. The hum of the fluorescent lights, the clock ticking, someone chewing, background conversations bleeding together. Your nervous system processes more sensory information than average brains, which means overstimulation is constant. This isn't being difficult, it's heightened sensory processing. Your brain absorbs more data from the environment than others, which helps you detect patterns faster, make connections others miss. But it also means the world is louder, brighter, more intense, and nobody understands why you need silence, why crowds drain you, why small sounds trigger disproportionate irritation. And beneath all of this sits the thing nobody talks about, the profound, aching loneliness of never being fully understood. You remember random details nobody else does, the exact date something happened, a tiny fact from a documentary, a word someone said years ago. Your working memory is exceptional, which sounds impressive until you realize it means you're constantly carrying information nobody else remembers or cares about. You make connections across conversations that happen months apart, and when you reference them, people look at you blankly. You feel emotions deeply, not just your own, others. You're hyper-aware of social dynamics, power structures, unspoken tensions, emotional undercurrents. Researchers found that intelligence and emotional intensity are linked. You don't just think deeply, you feel deeply. And that emotional sensitivity gets dismissed as being too sensitive, when it's actually neural sophistication. You stay up late because creative insights emerge when distractions fade. The London School of Economics found that people who prefer staying up late score higher on intelligence tests. But society punishes night owls, calls them lazy, tells them to just go to bed earlier, as if circadian rhythms are choices. And you never stop learning. You read, ask questions, seek better answers even when you already know enough, because your brain doesn't feel satisfied with surface-level understanding. It needs depth, complexity, continuous growth. And that drive isolates you further because most people reach good enough and stop, while you keep going. If you're reading this and recognizing yourself, you need to hear something. Being extremely intelligent doesn't make you better than other people, but it does make you different. And that difference is isolating in ways people with average intelligence will never fully understand. You're not broken. You're not too much. You're not arrogant for knowing what you know. You're navigating a world built for a different cognitive speed. And that's exhausting. The traits that make people call you too sensitive, or overthinking, or intense, those aren't flaws. They're features of a brain operating at a level most people don't experience. And you deserve to stop apologizing for processing reality differently. Find your people, the 1 in 40, the ones who understand without translation, who think at your speed, who don't make you shrink yourself to fit. They exist. They're rare, but they exist. And until you find them, know this: your intelligence isn't a curse. It's complexity in a world that values simplicity. And that makes you lonely, but it doesn't make you wrong. If this is the first time someone described your experience without pathologizing it, you're not alone. High IQ people have been misunderstood forever. This channel explores psychology nobody else validates. Subscribe to understand what makes you different, and drop a comment if this hit home. Let's find each other, because maybe together we can stop translating and just exist as we are.